TED Talk, but what led up to you doing the TED Talk, Echoes Beyond the Game, which for all of you watching this, I highly recommend this. It's 8 minutes, so it's great. So what led up to it, and how much time did it take you to prep for it?
So I think it was a series of events that led me to it. It was several years of what I felt like, one of my friends said they're beating their head against the wall. And I said, no, it was more like I felt like Don Quixote tilting at windmills. I would say, I know there's got to be a different way. We can get results without screaming at these kids. I really believe we're doing damage when we do this, and seeing the damage being done, even to my own kids with certain coaches who they weren't malicious people, but it was how they were coached. It's how they've been educated to coach, by certain mentors, et cetera. And it was getting results. So they figured if it's getting results and that's how I was coached and that's how my mentors did it,
Yep.
then it's okay to do. And all these events sort of led up to me coming home one day, and I got on a coach because this particular coach was screaming at a bunch of kids, and somebody said, well, he gets results. And I thought, at what expense, and I said something to the coach, and I didn't have an issue with the coach, because other than, I had an issue with the screaming, but there was, again, not a nasty human being. It was just this screaming at the kids. And I went home and I said something to my wife, and she said, honey, you for 10 years now, you've been coming home and telling me about this. And she says, and you cite research. She said, at that point I had 2 masters. She says, you have 2 masters, one in child development and one in sports psychology. And she goes, and you've cited so many research articles and so many experts. And she says, you've used data and talked to me about, anxiety, the anxiety curve, and, being under anxiety during performance begins to increase, but in some point in time, it hits that cliff and performance will drop off tremendously if anxiety overtakes the body. And she's like, isn't the yelling creating anxiety? Isn't there some kind of brain function? She goes, you're a neuroscience geek. She's like, do something about this. So I shouldn't say she talked me into it. She said, I really want you to share what you have with the world. She says, because the way you've coached over the last 20 some years has worked for you. And she goes, and you're getting the same results as these other coaches. And so the he gets results or she gets results excuse has to be tossed out the window, because you're replicating the same kind of results and you're not screaming. And so the TEDx talk came up. There was an ad on the local paper, Facebook or something, that talks were coming up. My wife said, you need to apply. And I didn't. And the day of application deadline, my wife says, have you applied yet? Calls. And I said, no. And she says, well, if you don't apply, I was working from home. She said, I'm coming home at lunch and we're having a serious conversation because you have to do this. She goes, I believe in you and you have to do this. So I applied, and I got 2 minutes at a salon where they brought like 30 of us there, and we had 2 minutes to sort of, and so I jumped up there the process. I jumped up there, got my 2 minutes, and it was from there. They said, you shut the house down, man. It was because it wasn't me. It was the issue was resonated with so many people, because there were so many people who, when you come out and say, raise your hand if you played sports, raise your hand if you went pro, and no hands go up, and you go, raise your hand if you had this kind of coach. And they all could sort of, there was empathy there. So they gave me the main stage,